Well, it's a good thing I waited late to do a video today because we have some great news. Well, not great news, but exciting news, interesting news. Something that is worth talking about Julian Assange coming out this afternoon. Apparently, there was some kind of preliminary court hearing today having to do with his extradition. Of course, the United States wants to extradite Julian Assange from the United Kingdom so that they can bring him up on espionage charges, which, again, is punishable by death here in the United States. So he's, literally fighting for his life over there. And apparently he submitted some kind of evidence that the Dana Rohrabacher, who, for those of you who are not American or just not familiar with Dana Rohrabacher, he was a congressman from California. I don't believe he's in office anymore. Early on, he was a big Trump guy. He was, generally considered back, a lot of the so-called grassroots conservatives used to like him. He was popular amongst the talk radio guys. Not a super well-known guy. Always kind of, I guess, unorthodox when it comes to the typical foreign policy stuff. There were, of course, always rumors that he was Putin's puppet. I don't know to what extent that's true. He also, in other cases, he seemed to have, I guess, independent views, because I don't know necessarily if he was bought and paid for by anyone. Because he also said that, Macedonia is not a country, which is not a very, doesn't seem to me like a pro-Putin sort of thing to say, and of course his point was that was a pro-Albanian point. So he seemed to take the sides of various countries in a rather erratic fashion. In what I've seen from Dana Rohrabacher. I never really was able to figure him out when he was in Congress, what he was after. He was, said nice things about Putin sometimes, but also, like I've said, would say very favorable things about Albania, like how they should annex all of Macedonia. So if my point is that he would be an interesting choice of someone to go to Assange to meet with him to discuss giving him a pardon, because I could see Dana Rohrabacher doing that, and that gives some credibility of this story. That lends this story some credibility, in my opinion. That it would be Dana Rohrabacher. He seems like a fitting person. If I were in Trump's shoes, that might be someone who I would pick. And so Assange's attorneys allege that Rohrabacher offered, Julian a pardon. Of course, there was a condition, and that condition was that he had to deny that, the Russians had any involvement in hacking, the DNC emails. And this is where the story seems to become a little unrealistic to me, where it doesn't quite make so much sense. Because why would Trump, if he's going to pardon Julian Assange, make that a condition, as if that's something that Julian Assange wasn't already saying? Julian Assange has maintained from the beginning that his source for the DNC emails that he got was not Russia. So he would have already fulfilled that condition. So why didn't he just get pardoned if that was the case? It makes me think that there was something more to this than just denying that the Russians hacked the DNC. And so hopefully the evidence that they have, because this was, they submitted evidence to the court, will be heard in public, so that we can, I guess, hash out, what really happened. I'd imagine that they have evidence of something to do with Dana Rohrabacher. I don't know what it proves necessarily. And on the other hand, I find it hard to believe that Trump ever would pardon Julian Assange. Maybe he would make him an offer. But I can't see him ever going through with that because, frankly, Trump, has still wanted to make it seem like, hey, he's the best friend of the national security state and of the cops. Even though he's railed against the deep state and all that, he's all, he and his allies, particularly the Sean Hannity types, have always couched all that language, in partisan political terms, saying that, oh, we don't hate the FBI, we just hate these Democrats in the FBI. You see, these Democrats who are doing Obama's bidding, that big boogeyman Obama. Which, of course, is utter nonsense. The deep state is loyal to themselves, not to, politicians. And so in order to appease them, Trump, I think, would have no choice but to, go throw the book at Assange and try and go for the death penalty if possible. Because remember, Assange's great crime was, of course, publishing, I think, that collateral murder video. That's probably his greatest crime in the eyes of the national security state, because it exposed, just one example of the U.S., doing something dumb in Iraq and killing civilians and then trying to cover it up. I mean, it wasn't even the greatest massacre in human history or anything. They killed like 5 people, which, again, is not the biggest deal in the world in the terms of war crimes. But I guess it was embarrassing enough to the national security state that they want Assange's head on a pike to make an example out of him to where, hey, you don't criticize our war crimes and get away with it. And Trump, as far as he's concerned, has already sort of gotten, his mileage out of Julian Assange. Assange has outlived his usefulness, so why not use him as to throw him to the wolves of the national security state and let the FBI do whatever they want with him. Now, beyond, the validity of whatever it is that, Assange is trying to put forward, whatever his story is, this, whole, idea, this whole story is getting twisted and mangled by the mainstream media, unsurprisingly, into something that, that Assange isn't even saying. So they're taking something, that is merely a claim which, doesn't seem too plausible in my eyes, and then they're twisting that around and saying that and making the case of something entirely different. That, of course, is that Trump offered to pardon Assange if he helped him cover up Russian hacking in the 2016 election, which is nowhere near what Assange said. Yet that is the headline that came across, I got an alert today from Twitter, and it said, "News for you, Trump offers to pardon Assange if he helped cover up Russian hacking." And I thought, gee, that's strange, since WikiLeaks has always said that their source wasn't Russia, and Julian Assange has, repeatedly said that, hey, this Russian hacking thing is fake news. It wasn't where I got all these emails. And so, you can't even say that that's poor framing on the part of the media. Anywhere that published that headline is just outright lying, because it absolutely is completely detached from the facts of this story, and what was said and what wasn't said. And so it's just another good example of, why, the media are such terrible enemies of not only the American people but the people of the world. They exist to manipulate us and turn us against each other to suit their own ends. Because, of course, the media in most countries is going to be a puppet of the national security state, even if that's not, the American national security state. In China, the media is the puppet of the CCP. In Russia, the media is the puppet of Putin. In Iran, the media is the puppet of the Ayatollah and of the mullahs. Media organizations are successful and grow and become prominent out of having a close relationship with the powers that be. And so it's no surprise that, they want to smear WikiLeaks and stoke all this, all this fear about Russia and making people, think that Russia is this big threat to the United States, as if it's, not basically an oil company with a flag. I hate to break it to, because, of course, now it used to be when Obama was president, all the fear over Russia, was on the Republican side, and now, of course, it's completely flipped. So I'd hate to break it to the Republicans of a few years ago or the Democrats of today, but, the fact of the matter is that Putin can't do anything to hurt you. He's not God. He's not, I can't even compare him to anyone, because really nobody throughout history has ever really posed a threat to people living in the United States. I guess maybe King George. That was the last existential threat that Americans faced. Of course, that was because at the time, King George was also the king of the 13 colonies that would become the United States. So wanting to start this whole republic thing was a bit of a problem as far as he was concerned. But really, after that, and after the War of 1812. No existential threats to Americans here, I guess, except by their own government. If you were a Japanese American during World War II, you got sent to the camps. Sorry about that. If you were a German American during World War I, or an Italian, or no, not Italian, I think it was just Germans, because Italians were allies in World War I, you got sent to the camps. If you were a Southerner during the Civil War, well, your town or your village was razed, and your family were likely killed. And of course, if you were a Native American, I don't want to skip over that period chronologically. During the post-Civil War era, in which the Indian Wars were going on in the West, well then, of course, you were under great threat from the American government. So, like I said, the only people that we should really be fearing is Washington. Those are the only folks who have done us any harm here. The Russians have never come over here and invaded the United States and killed any of our people. The Japanese didn't. The Germans didn't. The Italians didn't. The French, of course, have always been allies. But of course, and the Chinese. Let's not forget them. The Chinese have never done anything to hurt us either over here. So relax and learn to live a little, and don't let the media and their CIA puppet masters, get you all upset in a frenzy over Julian Assange, that nasty Australian, and his Russian overlords. So if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.